I never thought I'd be called a fraud at my own wife's funeral. But there I was, standing beside Eleanor's casket, while her daughter accused me of being a gold digger in front of 200 people. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my cane. Every eye in that church turned toward me like I was a criminal, not a grieving husband who just lost the love of his life. Let me back up for a second, because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with love. Real love. The kind that doesn't care about money or status or what people whisper behind closed doors. My name is Gerald Whitmore. I'm 70 years old now, and for 35 years I was married to Eleanor, a woman who came from Virginia old money, the kind with family portraits in the hallway and trust funds that never run dry. Me. I was a mechanical engineer who built turbines and engines, worked my way up from nothing. When we got married, her family called me the mechanic who married above his station. They never let me forget it. But Eleanor saw something different. She saw loyalty. She saw a man who didn't measure love in dollar signs. And for 3 decades, we built a life together that money couldn't buy. We had Sunday mornings with coffee on the porch, quiet evenings by the fireplace, and conversations that lasted until midnight. She was my best friend, my partner, my everything. The problem wasn't Eleanor. It was Clarissa, her daughter from her first marriage. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Clarissa was 15 when I met her, already spoiled rotten and used to snapping her fingers to get whatever she wanted. Her real father had left when she was young, and I tried to step in, tried to be the dad she never had. I bought her a car for her 16th birthday. She called it cheap. I paid for her entire college tuition at an Ivy League school. She complained that her friends' parents bought them penthouses. I showed up to her graduation with flowers and pride. She barely looked at me, introduced me to her friends as just family. And still, I kept trying. Not because I was weak, but because Eleanor believed in her daughter. She'd hold my hand at night and say, "Gerald, she's hurting inside. One day she'll see how much you love her." That day never came. Instead, what came was Eleanor's funeral at St. Albans Church, a cathedral filled with politicians, business associates, and people I'd never met. I stood there in my black suit, numb, holding a program with Eleanor's smiling face printed on the front. My chest felt hollow. My legs barely held me up. Then Clarissa walked in late, wearing designer sunglasses and a black gown that probably cost more than my first car. She didn't hug me. Didn't even look at me. Just whispered with her slick boyfriend in the back pew while the priest said his final prayer. And then, before anyone could move, she stood up. Her voice echoed off the stone walls. Before we close this chapter, there's something everyone needs to know. The entire congregation went silent. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. "Gerald Whitmore is not my mother's real husband," she announced, loud and sharp. "And he's definitely not my real father. He's been living off her wealth for decades, manipulating her, controlling her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. People stared. I couldn't breathe. I thought I might collapse right there beside Eleanor's casket. And then, the lawyer stood up. Mr. Caldwell, calm as ever, reached into his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope with Eleanor's handwriting on it. He looked straight at Clarissa and said, "Your mother prepared something before she died. Something she wanted everyone to hear today. If you've ever been accused of something you didn't do, drop a comment below. Because what happened next changed everything. People always ask me how I ended up with a woman like Eleanor. They see the headlines, wealthy widow, old Virginia family, country club membership, and they assume I was some smooth talker who swept her off her feet with charm. The truth. I almost walked away the first time I met her. It was 1985. I was 43 years old, single, and working as a senior engineer at a manufacturing plant outside Richmond. I'd been married once before, years earlier, but it didn't last. After that, I threw myself into work. 60-hour weeks. Projects that kept my mind busy and my heart locked away. Then one afternoon, my boss invited me to a charity gala for a children's hospital. I didn't want to go. Tuxedos and champagne weren't my scene. But he insisted, said it would be good for business connections. So I went, uncomfortable in a rented suit, nursing a glass of ginger ale while everyone else clinked wine glasses and laughed at jokes I didn't understand. That's when I saw her. Eleanor. She was standing near the silent auction table, wearing a navy dress that wasn't flashy but somehow made everyone else look overdressed. She had this calm presence, like she didn't need to fight for attention. And when she smiled at the waiter who refilled her glass, it wasn't the fake politeness you see at these events. It was genuine. I don't know what came over me, but I walked up and said something stupid about the auction item, a model sailboat. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "You sail?" she asked. "Not even close," I admitted. "I just know how things are built. That boat's got terrible rigging." She laughed again, and we spent the next hour talking about everything except money. She asked about my work, seemed genuinely fascinated by turbine design. I asked about her late husband, and she spoke about him with respect but not sadness. He'd been gone 5 years by then. Cancer. By the end of the night, she gave me her number. Handwritten on a napkin. 3 months later, we were inseparable. 6 months after that, I proposed in her living room, no fancy restaurant or grand gesture. Just me, her, and a simple ring I'd saved up for. Her family lost their minds. Her brother called me a fortune hunter. Her sister-in-law said I was clearly after the estate. Even distant cousins I'd never met sent letters warning Eleanor she was making a terrible mistake. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She looked me in the eye one night and said, "Gerald, I've spent my whole life around people who measure worth in bank accounts. You're the first man who ever asked me what I think, not what I own." We got married in a small ceremony. Her family didn't show up. It was just us, a judge, and 2 friends as witnesses. And you know what? Those were the happiest years of my life. We traveled, not to fancy resorts, but to small towns where we could walk hand in hand without anyone caring who she was. We cooked dinner together. We argued about movies. We laughed until we cried. But there was always one shadow looming over our happiness. Clarissa. Eleanor's daughter was 20 when we got married, already out of college and working at her mother's company. From day one, she made it clear she didn't approve. At our wedding reception, just a small dinner with close friends, Clarissa showed up an hour late, didn't congratulate us, and left early without saying goodbye. Eleanor tried to brush it off. "She's adjusting," she'd say. "Give her time." I gave her years. I invited Clarissa to family dinners. She'd show up, eat in silence, and leave. I sent her birthday cards. She never responded. I offered to help her with career advice when she struggled at work. She told me to mind my own business. Eleanor would cry sometimes, late at night when she thought I was asleep. I'd hold her and promise that things would get better. But deep down, I wondered if they ever would. One Christmas, I tried to make peace. I bought Clarissa an expensive watch, something I knew she wanted. When she opened it, she looked at the brand, looked at me, and said, "This is the cheap version." Eleanor's face went pale. I just smiled and said, "Well, it tells time, doesn't it?" Later that night, Eleanor apologized for her daughter's behavior. I told her it wasn't her fault. But inside, something hardened. I realized that no matter what I did, Clarissa would always see me as the outsider who stole her mother. What I didn't know then was that her resentment was just beginning. And by the time Eleanor got sick, Clarissa's greed would turn into something far more dangerous. Because when money's involved, people stop pretending to care about love. They show you exactly who they are. Have you ever bent over backwards for someone who refused to appreciate you? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone. If there's one thing I learned about Clarissa, it's that she didn't become cruel overnight. She was built that way, brick by brick, spoiled by a mother who gave too much and expected too little in return. By the time she hit her 20s, Clarissa had perfected the art of entitlement. She lived in a penthouse apartment Eleanor paid for, drove a Mercedes Eleanor leased, and worked at Eleanor's company in a position she didn't earn. And still, it was never enough. I remember one particular afternoon, maybe 5 years into my marriage with Eleanor. Clarissa called the house, furious because her assistant had quit. Not because she was overworked or underpaid, but because Clarissa had thrown a stapler at her during a meeting. Eleanor tried to smooth things over, offered to hire a replacement. Clarissa's response? I need someone competent this time, not another charity case you feel sorry for. That's when I spoke up. Clarissa, maybe the problem isn't the assistants. Maybe it's how you treat them. The phone went silent. Then she laughed, cold and sharp. Spoken like someone who's never managed people. Stick to your engines, Gerald. She hung up. Eleanor looked at me with tired eyes and said, she's under a lot of stress. Stress. That was always the excuse. But stress doesn't make you throw things at people. Stress doesn't make you treat service workers like dirt. Stress doesn't make you embarrass your stepfather at every family gathering because you think he's beneath you. The worst moment came at Clarissa's 30th birthday party. Eleanor had rented out an entire restaurant, invited all of Clarissa's friends, colleagues, and distant relatives. She'd even hired a live band. I wore my best suit, brought a thoughtful gift, a first-edition book Clarissa had mentioned wanting years ago. When I handed it to her, she barely glanced at it. Oh, a book. How quaint. Her friends snickered. One of them, some trust fund kid in a designer blazer, leaned over and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Isn't he the mechanic?" Clarissa didn't correct him. She just smiled. I felt Eleanor's hand squeeze mine under the table. Her eyes said, "Please don't make a scene." So I didn't. I sat there through dinner, through speeches where Clarissa thanked everyone except me, through toasts where she praised her mother but acted like I didn't exist. On the drive home, Eleanor broke down crying. I don't know what happened to her, Gerald. She used to be kind. She used to care. People change, I said quietly. Or maybe they just show you who they really were all along. But Eleanor refused to give up. She kept trying to bridge the gap, kept inviting Clarissa over, kept paying her bills and bailing her out of bad investments. And every single time, Clarissa took without saying thank you. Then came the accusations. It started small. Clarissa told relatives I was controlling Eleanor's finances. Not true. I had my own retirement savings and never touched Eleanor's accounts. Then she claimed I was isolating Eleanor from the family. Also not true. I encouraged Eleanor to see her relatives, even the ones who hated me. But the lie that hurt the most came during a charity gala. Eleanor and I were standing near the bar when Clarissa approached with her boyfriend, the real estate agent with slicked back hair and a Rolex he probably couldn't afford. She walked right up to Eleanor, ignored me completely, and said loud enough for others to hear, "Mom, I'm worried about you. People are starting to talk about how Gerald controls everything you do." Eleanor's face went white. "Clarissa, that's not true. Isn't it?" Clarissa shot back. "When's the last time you made a decision without asking him first?" I stayed calm. "Clarissa, your mother and I are partners. That's how marriage works." She turned to me, eyes cold. "You're not her partner. You're her mistake." The people around us went silent. Eleanor grabbed my arm, shaking. I wanted to defend myself, wanted to list every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd swallowed my pride for her daughter's sake. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something. Clarissa wasn't interested in the truth. She was interested in winning. And the only way to win against someone like that is to stop playing their game. Eleanor and I left the gala early. She didn't speak the whole drive home. When we got inside, she went straight to her office and shut the door. I found her an hour later, sitting at her desk, staring at a photo of Clarissa as a little girl. Tears streaked her cheeks. "She used to hold my hand everywhere we went," Eleanor whispered. "She used to tell me I was her hero." I knelt beside her chair. "You still are. She just can't see it anymore." Eleanor looked at me, and for the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Not doubt in me, but doubt in her daughter. That night, Eleanor started coughing. Just a little at first. But it wouldn't stop. 2 weeks later, the doctors told us it was cancer. If you've ever watched someone you love turn into someone you don't recognize, type "I understand" in the comments. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't losing people, it's watching them choose to leave. Cancer doesn't care about your plans. It doesn't wait for a convenient time. It just shows up, uninvited, and destroys everything in its path. Eleanor's diagnosis came on a Tuesday afternoon in spring. We'd gone to the doctor thinking it was bronchitis, maybe pneumonia. Instead, we sat in a sterile office while a man in a white coat told us Eleanor had stage 3 lung cancer. Non-small cell. Aggressive. Eleanor didn't cry. She just nodded, asked about treatment options, and held my hand so tight I thought she might break my fingers. I cried later, alone in our garage, sitting in my old work truck with my head in my hands. The next 18 months were the hardest of my life. Eleanor went through chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Some days she couldn't get out of bed. Other days she insisted on cooking dinner, on tending her garden, on pretending everything was normal. I became her full-time caretaker. I drove her to every appointment, sat through every treatment, held her hair back when the nausea hit. I learned how to change 4 bags, how to manage her medications, how to smile even when I was terrified. And through it all, Clarissa was nowhere to be found. Oh, she visited. Maybe once a month, always with an excuse about being busy at work. She'd sit in Eleanor's bedroom for 20 minutes, scroll through her phone, and leave. Never offered to help. Never asked what we needed. Just checked the box so she could say she'd been there. But the worst part wasn't her absence. It was what she did when she showed up. One afternoon, about 6 months into Eleanor's treatment, I came home early from the pharmacy to find Clarissa in Eleanor's office, rifling through the file cabinet. "What are you doing?" I asked, standing in the doorway. She didn't even flinch. "Looking for Mom's will. She mentioned updating it, and I want to make sure everything's in order. Your mother's will is none of your business until she's gone. And she's not gone." Clarissa turned to face me, folders still in her hands. "You know what I think, Gerald? I think you're worried. Because once Mom realizes what you're really after, you'll get exactly what you deserve. Nothing." I wanted to yell. I wanted to throw her out of the house. But I didn't. Because Eleanor was upstairs, weak and fragile, and the last thing she needed was more stress. "Get out," I said quietly. Clarissa smirked. "This is my mother's house. I'll leave when I'm ready." "No," a voice said from behind me. "You'll leave now." I turned. Eleanor stood at the top of the stairs, pale and thin, wrapped in a blanket. She looked like a ghost, but her voice was steady. "Mom, I was just—" "I know what you were doing," Eleanor said. "And I want you to leave. Now." Clarissa's face twisted with something between rage and panic. "You're really choosing him over me?" Eleanor descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. When she reached the bottom, she looked her daughter in the eye. "I'm not choosing anyone, Clarissa. But I'm done pretending you care about anything other than money." Clarissa left without another word. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Eleanor collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I held her while she cried, felt her frail body shake against mine. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with her." "Don't apologize," I said. "This isn't your fault." But deep down, I wondered if it was. If Eleanor had been too soft, too forgiving, too willing to excuse bad behavior because she loved her daughter unconditionally. That night, after Eleanor fell asleep, I found her sitting at her desk. She'd written something on a piece of paper. I didn't read it then, but later I'd learn it was the beginning of a letter. A letter that would change everything. The months that followed were a blur of hospital visits, bad news, and small mercies. Eleanor's cancer went into remission briefly, and for a few weeks we dared to hope. We took a trip to the coast, walked on the beach, watched the sunset like we had 30 years ago. But the cancer came back. Harder, faster, meaner. By the time winter came, Eleanor was bedridden. She couldn't eat solid food, could barely speak without coughing. But she still smiled at me every morning, still told me she loved me every night. Clarissa visited once during those final months. She stood in the doorway of Eleanor's bedroom, wouldn't even come inside. "I just wanted to see how you're doing," she said, her voice flat. Eleanor looked at her daughter with sad, knowing eyes. "I'm dying, Clarissa." "But you already knew that." Clarissa left 5 minutes later. 2 weeks before Eleanor died, she asked me to bring her a pen and paper. Her hands shook as she wrote, but she refused my help. When she finished, she sealed the letter in an envelope and handed it to Mr. Caldwell, her lawyer, who'd come to visit. "Make sure this is read at my funeral," she told him. "In front of everyone." "Eleanor, are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I've spent my whole life being kind. It's time for the truth." She died on a Sunday morning, just as the sun came up. I was holding her hand. Her last words were, "You gave me the best years of my life, Gerald." And then she was gone. I sat there for an hour, unable to move, unable to process that the woman I'd loved for 35 years was gone. The doctors came, the nurses came, the formalities happened around me. But all I could think was, how do you bury someone who was your whole world? I'd find out soon enough. At her funeral. When Clarissa turned her mother's goodbye into my public execution. Have you ever had to be strong when everything inside you was breaking? Drop a heart in the comments for everyone fighting battles no one else can see. People always ask me how I ended up with a woman like Eleanor. They see the headlines, wealthy widow, old Virginia family, country club membership, and they assume I was some smooth talker who swept her off her feet with charm. The truth. I almost walked away the first time I met her. It was 1985. I was 43 years old, single, and working as a senior engineer at a manufacturing plant outside Richmond. I'd been married once before, years earlier, but it didn't last. After that, I threw myself into work. 60-hour weeks. Projects that kept my mind busy and my heart locked away. Then one afternoon, my boss invited me to a charity gala for a children's hospital. I didn't want to go. Tuxedos and champagne weren't my scene. But he insisted, said it would be good for business connections. So I went, uncomfortable in a rented suit, nursing a glass of ginger ale while everyone else clinked wine glasses and laughed at jokes I didn't understand. That's when I saw her. Eleanor. She was standing near the silent auction table, wearing a navy dress that wasn't flashy but somehow made everyone else look overdressed. She had this calm presence, like she didn't need to fight for attention. And when she smiled at the waiter who refilled her glass, it wasn't the fake politeness you see at these events. It was genuine. I don't know what came over me, but I walked up and said something stupid about the auction item, a model sailboat. She laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real laugh that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "You sail?" she asked. "Not even close," I admitted. "I just know how things are built. That boat's got terrible rigging." She laughed again, and we spent the next hour talking about everything except money. She asked about my work, seemed genuinely fascinated by turbine design. I asked about her late husband, and she spoke about him with respect but not sadness. He'd been gone 5 years by then. Cancer. By the end of the night, she gave me her number, handwritten on a napkin. 3 months later, we were inseparable. 6 months after that, I proposed in her living room, no fancy restaurant or grand gesture. Just me, her, and a simple ring I'd saved up for. Her family lost their minds. Her brother called me a fortune hunter. Her sister-in-law said I was clearly after the estate. Even distant cousins I'd never met sent letters warning Eleanor she was making a terrible mistake. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She looked me in the eye one night and said, "Gerald, I've spent my whole life around people who measure worth in bank accounts. You're the first man who ever asked me what I think, not what I own." We got married in a small ceremony. Her family didn't show up. It was just us, a judge, and 2 friends as witnesses. And you know what? Those were the happiest years of my life. We traveled, not to fancy resorts, but to small towns where we could walk hand in hand without anyone caring who she was. We cooked dinner together. We argued about movies. We laughed until we cried. But there was always one shadow looming over our happiness. Clarissa. Eleanor's daughter was 20 when we got married, already out of college and working at her mother's company. From day one, she made it clear she didn't approve. At our wedding reception, just a small dinner with close friends, Clarissa showed up an hour late, didn't congratulate us, and left early without saying goodbye. Eleanor tried to brush it off. "She's adjusting," she'd say. "Give her time." I gave her years. I invited Clarissa to family dinners. She'd show up, eat in silence, and leave. I sent her birthday cards. She never responded. I offered to help her with career advice when she struggled at work. She told me to mind my own business. Eleanor would cry sometimes, late at night when she thought I was asleep. I'd hold her and promise that things would get better. But deep down, I wondered if they ever would. One Christmas, I tried to make peace. I bought Clarissa an expensive watch, something I knew she wanted. When she opened it, she looked at the brand, looked at me, and said, "This is the cheap version." Eleanor's face went pale. I just smiled and said, "Well, it tells time, doesn't it?" Later that night, Eleanor apologized for her daughter's behavior. I told her it wasn't her fault. But inside, something hardened. I realized that no matter what I did, Clarissa would always see me as the outsider who stole her mother. What I didn't know then was that her resentment was just beginning. And by the time Eleanor got sick, Clarissa's greed would turn into something far more dangerous. Because when money's involved, people stop pretending to care about love. They show you exactly who they are. Have you ever bent over backwards for someone who refused to appreciate you? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Mr. Caldwell stood there holding that envelope like it was made of gold, and I swear the entire church stopped breathing. Even the people in the back pews leaned forward. Clarissa's boyfriend shifted in his seat, suddenly looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. And Clarissa herself, her confident smirk was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Caldwell cleared his throat and began to read in that calm, steady voice of his. "My dearest family and friends," the letter started. "If you're hearing this, then I've finally found peace. But I know my death will leave questions behind, and I refuse to let those questions destroy the people I love. My hands were shaking. I gripped the edge of the pew in front of me just to stay upright. First, to my beloved husband, Gerald. Caldwell's voice softened. You have been my rock, my anchor, my safe harbor in every storm. You never once asked me for money. You only asked for my heart, and I gave it freely. You held my hand through sickness, dried my tears in the dark, and showed me what real partnership looks like. You are, and always will be, the greatest blessing of my life. I couldn't stop the tears. They just came, hot and fast, blurring everything around me. Someone in the crowd sniffled. An older woman 2 rows back was openly crying. But Caldwell wasn't done. He turned slightly, his eyes finding Clarissa in the back. To my daughter, Clarissa, he continued, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I pray that someday you'll understand that love isn't measured in bank statements or inheritance checks. It's measured in sacrifice, in showing up, in choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. Clarissa's face went from pale to red. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought she might crack a tooth. You have spent years mistaking my generosity for weakness, Caldwell read. You've treated Gerald, a man who asked for nothing and gave everything, like he was beneath you. And in doing so, you've shown me that the biggest gift I can give you isn't money. It's a chance to change before greed destroys you completely. Someone in the crowd gasped. Clarissa stood up like she was going to storm out, but her boyfriend grabbed her arm and pulled her back down. Smart move on his part, because every eye in that building was glued to what came next. Finally, Caldwell said, his voice firm and clear, I want to make my intentions crystal clear. My estate, including all business assets, properties, and financial accounts, will be divided according to my will. That document has been notarized, witnessed, and filed with the state. But more importantly, I want everyone here to know this. Gerald is my husband, not by accident, not by manipulation, but by choice. My choice. And I trust him with everything I've built because he's the only person who ever loved me for who I am, not what I have. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Caldwell folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then he looked directly at Clarissa. Your mother's wishes are clear, he said. And they will be honored. Clarissa shot to her feet, her face twisted with rage. This is bullshit, she shouted, her voice echoing off the stone walls. He manipulated her. He probably wrote that letter himself while she was dying. Caldwell didn't flinch. The letter was written in your mother's hand, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and recorded 6 months before her death. I have the original document, along with a video recording of her reading it aloud to ensure there's no question of authenticity. Clarissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Her boyfriend tugged her sleeve, whispering something urgent. But she wasn't listening. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You're a fraud, Gerald. A parasite. And everyone in this room knows it. But no one moved. No one agreed. Instead, people started whispering to each other, shaking their heads. An older gentleman near the front, one of Eleanor's business partners, stood up and walked over to me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry for your loss, Gerald, he said loud enough for others to hear. Eleanor was lucky to have you. Others followed. One by one, people I barely knew came up to shake my hand, to hug me, to tell me they were sorry. And with every person who showed me kindness, Clarissa looked smaller and smaller. She finally stormed out, her boyfriend trailing behind her like a lost puppy. The church doors slammed shut, and for a moment, everything was quiet again. Then the priest stepped forward and said softly, Let us continue with our final prayers for Eleanor. The service ended 20 minutes later. People filed out slowly, some stopping to look at Eleanor's portrait one last time. I stayed behind, standing beside her casket, just me and her in the empty church. You always knew how to make a statement, I whispered to her. Even from the grave. I touched the smooth wood of her casket one last time, then turned and walked out into the cold afternoon. Caldwell was waiting by his car. Tomorrow, he said. 10 o'clock. My office. The formal will reading. I nodded. Will she be there? She has to be, he said. Whether she likes it or not. That night, I sat alone in our house, staring at the fireplace. Eleanor's reading glasses were still on the side table. Her bookmark was still holding her place in a novel she'd never finish. And I realized that even though she was gone, she was still protecting me, still fighting for me, still loving me. And tomorrow, at that will reading, Clarissa was going to learn just how far a mother's love could reach, even after death. If you've ever had someone defend you when you couldn't defend yourself, type loyalty in the comments. Because what happened the next day changed everything forever. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in Eleanor's favorite chair, wrapped in the blanket she used to keep on the couch, staring at nothing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Clarissa's face at the funeral, twisted with rage and entitlement. Every time I tried to rest, I heard her voice echoing through that church, calling me a fraud. But I also heard Eleanor's words from that letter. Words she'd written knowing exactly what would happen. Words that defended me when I couldn't defend myself. Morning came gray and cold. I showered, put on my suit, and drove to Caldwell's office in downtown Richmond. The building was old brick, the kind with marble floors and dark wood paneling that made you feel like you were stepping back in time. The receptionist led me to a conference room on the 3rd floor. Caldwell was already there, setting up documents on a long mahogany table. He looked up when I entered. Gerald. Coffee. I shook my head. I just want this over with. He nodded. Understandable. Clarissa should be here shortly. 5 minutes later, the door opened. Clarissa walked in wearing a cream-colored suit, designer handbag, and an expression that somehow managed to be both furious and confident at the same time. Her boyfriend wasn't with her. Smart, she probably realized bringing him would make her look worse. She sat down across from me without a word, crossed her legs, and pulled out her phone. Caldwell waited another minute, then closed the door. Thank you both for coming. This shouldn't take long. He pulled out a bound document and adjusted his reading glasses. This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, dated April 15th of last year, approximately 6 months before her death. The document has been properly notarized and witnessed. Clarissa's nails tapped against the table. Tap, tap, tap. Caldwell began reading the legal language, all the standard stuff about sound mind, revocations of previous wills, executor appointments. Then he got to the distribution of assets. To my husband, Gerald Thomas Whitmore, he read, I leave the following: full ownership of our primary residence at 1247 Elmwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal property contained therein. Full control of the Eleanor Whitmore Family Trust, valued at approximately $8.2 million. Controlling shares of Whitmore Textiles Company, totaling 65% ownership. I felt my chest tighten. Eleanor had left me everything that mattered. Everything she'd built. Caldwell continued. Additionally, Gerald is to receive all vehicles, bank accounts held jointly in our names, and the summer property in Charlottesville. Clarissa's tapping stopped. Her face had gone pale. To my daughter, Clarissa and Whitmore, Caldwell read, and Clarissa sat up straighter, waiting. I leave a financial inheritance of $50,000. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Clarissa blinked. 50,000? That's it. Caldwell looked up. There are conditions. What conditions? Her voice was sharp, dangerous. The inheritance is conditional upon your completion of a certified financial counseling program, verified and documented within 12 months of the date of death. Failure to complete this requirement will result in forfeiture of the bequest. Clarissa shot out of her chair. You've got to be kidding me. $50,000 and I have to jump through hoops to get it? My mother was worth millions. Your mother was very clear about her reasoning, Caldwell said calmly. She included a personal note. He pulled out another document and began reading. Clarissa, I've given you everything you ever asked for. Cars, apartments, job positions you didn't earn, money you didn't work for. And in return, you've shown me nothing but contempt. I'm giving you this conditional gift not as punishment, but as one final chance to learn the value of earning something instead of expecting it. I hope you take it. I hope you change. But if you don't, at least I'll know I tried. Clarissa's hands were shaking. He made her write this. He manipulated her when she was sick and dying. I'd been quiet up until then, just sitting there taking it all in. But something in me snapped. I never manipulated anyone, I said, my voice low and steady. Your mother made this decision because you proved to her, over and over, that the only thing you cared about was money. She died hoping you'd change. But even now, standing here, all you can think about is what you didn't get. You don't get to talk to me, she screamed. You're nobody. You were a mechanic who got lucky. I was an engineer who loved your mother, I said. And that's something you'll never understand. Caldwell cleared his throat. There's one more clause, Clarissa. You need to hear it. She whipped around to face him. What now? If you contest this will in any form, through legal challenge, defamation, or any attempt to overturn your mother's wishes, your inheritance will be forfeited entirely. The $50,000 will be redirected to the Children's Hope Foundation, a charity supporting foster children. Clarissa's face went from red to white. She wouldn't do that. She wouldn't cut me off completely. She already did, Caldwell said quietly. This will is ironclad. I helped draft it myself. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that your mother was of sound mind and clear intention when she signed it. For the first time since I'd met her, Clarissa looked genuinely broken. Not sad, not grieving, but broken. Like someone had just told her the rules of the world didn't apply the way she thought they did. This isn't over, she said, grabbing her purse. I'll fight this. I'll hire lawyers. I'll prove he manipulated her. Caldwell stood. That's your choice. But I should warn you, your mother anticipated this reaction. She included video testimony, medical records proving her mental competency, and sworn statements from 3 independent witnesses. You won't win. You'll only lose what little she left you. Clarissa stared at him, then at me. Her eyes were wet, but I couldn't tell if it was from rage or something deeper. I hate you, she said to me. I've always hated you. I know, I said softly. But I tried to love you anyway. She turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame on the wall rattled. Caldwell let out a long breath and sat down. Well, that went about as expected. I just nodded, feeling emptier than I thought possible. Gerald, Caldwell said after a moment, Eleanor loved you very much. She wanted you to be taken care of. And she wanted to give Clarissa one last chance to become someone worth being proud of. Do you think she'll take it? I asked. He shook his head slowly. Honestly, no. But Eleanor died hoping. And sometimes hope is all we can give. I signed the papers, shook Caldwell's hand, and walked out into the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. You haven't won, old man. I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are. I deleted it without responding. Because Eleanor had already told everyone what I really was. And for the first time in years, I didn't need to defend myself. The truth had done it for me. If you believe in justice, even when it takes time, drop a comment below. Because sometimes the quietest victory is the loudest message. The weeks after the will reading were strange. Quiet, but not peaceful. Like the air before a thunderstorm when you know something's coming but you're not sure what. I stayed in the house, Eleanor's house, trying to figure out what life looked like now. Every morning I made coffee for 2 out of habit, then stared at the empty chair across from me. Every evening I'd set the table and forget she wasn't coming down for dinner. Grief has a way of playing tricks on your mind, making you forget reality for just a second before it crashes back down. But while I was learning to live alone, Clarissa was doing exactly what she'd promised, trying to destroy my name. It started online. She posted on social media, calling me a con artist, a manipulator, claiming I'd isolated her mother from the family and stolen her inheritance. She tagged distant relatives, old business associates, anyone who might listen. Some people believed her at first. I got a few nasty messages, a couple of blocked contacts. But then something interesting happened. People started sharing Eleanor's funeral letter. Someone had recorded it on their phone, and the video went viral in our small social circle. Suddenly, everyone could see Eleanor's own words defending me, explaining her choices, calling out Clarissa's greed. The narrative shifted fast. Eleanor's business partners reached out to offer support. Friends I hadn't heard from in years called to check on me. Even some of Eleanor's distant relatives, the ones who'd looked down on me for decades, sent apologetic notes saying they should have trusted Eleanor's judgment from the beginning. And Clarissa, she doubled down. She hired a lawyer to contest the will, just like Caldwell predicted she would. Some young guy fresh out of law school who probably took the case thinking he'd get a big payday. They filed paperwork claiming Eleanor had been under undue influence, that she wasn't mentally competent when she made her final will. Caldwell called me the day he received the challenge. "Don't worry," he said. "We have everything we need. Medical records, psychiatric evaluations, video testimony. They don't have a case." "Then why do it?" I asked. "Because she's desperate. And desperate people make bad decisions." The case dragged on for 2 months. Depositions, medical reviews, witness statements. I had to sit in conference rooms and answer questions about my marriage, my finances, my relationship with Eleanor. They tried to paint me as some kind of gold digger who'd wormed his way into a rich woman's life. But the evidence didn't lie. Dr. Morrison, Eleanor's oncologist, testified that she'd been mentally sharp until her final week. The psychiatrist who evaluated her during her illness confirmed she showed no signs of cognitive decline or susceptibility to manipulation. And the video Eleanor recorded, the one where she explained her reasoning in her own words, looking directly at the camera, was impossible to argue with. The judge threw out Clarissa's case in 15 minutes. I wasn't there for the ruling, but Caldwell called me right after. "It's done," he said. "The will stands. And because Clarissa contested it, she forfeits her inheritance. The $50,000 goes to the Children's Hope Foundation, just like Eleanor specified." I sat down on the porch steps, phone pressed to my ear, and felt nothing. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just exhaustion. "She lost everything," Caldwell continued. "And she's responsible for legal fees on both sides. I heard her lawyer already dropped her as a client." "Thanks for letting me know," I said quietly. That night, I got another message from Clarissa's number. This one was different. "I hope you're happy. You took everything from me." I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to tell her she'd done this to herself. But another part, the part that remembered the little girl Eleanor used to talk about, the one who held her mother's hand and called her a hero, just felt sad. So I didn't respond. I just turned off my phone and sat in the silence. 3 weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Clarissa had left town. Sold her car, packed up her apartment, and moved to California chasing some new business venture. Her boyfriend had left her right after the will ruling. Turns out he was only around for the money he thought she'd inherit. I thought that would be the end of it. That Clarissa would disappear into her new life and I'd never hear from her again. But 6 months after Eleanor's death, something happened that I didn't expect. I was sitting on the back porch one evening, watching the sunset and thinking about Eleanor, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello. Silence. Then a shaky breath. Gerald. It was Clarissa's voice. But it didn't sound like her. It sounded broken. What do you want, Clarissa? Another long pause. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I gripped the phone tighter. Sorry for what? For everything. Her voice cracked. For the funeral. For the lawsuit. For all of it. Every horrible thing I ever said or did. I didn't say anything. Didn't trust it. I lost everything, she continued, and now she was crying. My money's gone. My boyfriend left. My friends won't return my calls. I'm living in a studio apartment working retail and I can't even afford groceries half the time. And the worst part is, I deserve it. I deserve all of it. I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to hang up. Part of me wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her crocodile tears. But another part, the part that Eleanor had loved, just listened. I've been going to therapy, she said quietly. Like Mom wanted. I didn't do it for the money since that's gone anyway. I did it because I couldn't figure out why I turned into someone even I don't recognize. And what did you figure out? I asked, my voice flat. That I've been angry my whole life. At my dad for leaving. At Mom for moving on. At you for being everything my dad wasn't. And I spent so long being angry that I forgot how to be anything else. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at Eleanor's garden. She'd planted roses there. They were blooming now, red and beautiful. Your mother tried to tell you that, I said. For years. I know. Clarissa's voice was barely a whisper. And now she's gone and I can't tell her I'm sorry. I can't tell her I finally get it. I can't tell her that she was right about you. About everything. For the first time since Eleanor died, I felt something crack open in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. She knew, I said softly. She died knowing you might figure it out someday. That's why she left you that condition. She wanted you to have a chance to change. Clarissa sobbed on the other end of the line. I wasted it. I wasted everything. Then don't waste what's left, I said. You're still alive. You can still choose to be different. We sat in silence for a long moment, two people connected by loss and regret and the memory of someone who'd loved us both despite our flaws. I don't expect you to forgive me, Clarissa finally said. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. And that Mom was lucky to have you. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there on that porch until the sun disappeared completely and the stars came out. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. Didn't feel bitter. I just felt peace. Have you ever received an apology you never expected? Share your story below. Because sometimes healing comes from the most surprising places. Life after that phone call changed in ways I didn't expect. Not dramatically, no big revelations or sudden transformations, but slowly, like ice melting in spring. I started going through Eleanor's things. Not to get rid of them, but to organize them, to understand the life she'd built before me and the life we'd built together. I found old photo albums from her first marriage, pictures of young Clarissa smiling with missing teeth and pigtails. I found journals where Eleanor worried about being a good mother, about whether she was too soft or too strict. I found letters she'd written to me but never sent, pages full of love and gratitude and fear about leaving me alone. Reading those letters broke me in ways the funeral hadn't. Because in them, Eleanor wasn't the strong woman everyone saw. She was scared. Scared of dying, scared of leaving me, scared that Clarissa would destroy everything good after she was gone. But she'd also written something that stuck with me. Gerald, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I need you to know something important. You don't owe anyone your bitterness. Not even Clarissa. Anger is heavy, and I don't want you carrying it for the rest of your life. Let it go. Live. Be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. So I started trying to do exactly that. I joined a grief support group at the community center. Sat in a circle with other people who'd lost spouses, listened to their stories, shared mine. It helped more than I thought it would, knowing I wasn't alone in this strange new life. I started volunteering at the Children's Hope Foundation, the charity that received Clarissa's forfeited inheritance. Turned out Eleanor had been a donor for years, something I hadn't known. I helped with their weekend programs, teaching basic engineering concepts to kids in foster care. It felt good to use my skills again, to see young faces light up when something clicked. And slowly, very slowly, the house stopped feeling like a tomb and started feeling like a home again. I kept Eleanor's garden alive. Learned how to prune roses and plant bulbs for spring. I cooked her recipes, even the ones I messed up. I watched the movies we used to watch together and talked to her empty chair like she was still there listening. People probably would have thought I was crazy if they'd seen me. But I didn't care. It helped. About 8 months after Eleanor's death, Caldwell called to tell me Clarissa had completed her court-ordered financial counseling. She doesn't get the inheritance, obviously, he said. But she followed through anyway. Thought you'd want to know. I did want to know. It meant something, even if I wasn't sure what. 2 months after that, a package arrived at my door. No return address, but the postmark said California. Inside was a small wooden box and a handwritten note. The note was from Clarissa. Gerald, I found this in storage. It's a music box Mom got me when I was 7. I broke it years ago during a tantrum because she wouldn't buy me something I wanted. I never told her I was sorry. I had it repaired. I want you to have it. Not because I think it makes up for anything, but because you loved her and she loved music boxes. I'm still working on being better. Some days are harder than others. But I'm trying. Thank you for listening that night. See. I opened the box. Inside was a tiny ballerina that spun when you wound the key. The tune it played was one Eleanor used to hum while cooking, some old song from her childhood. I sat at the kitchen table and let that music box play over and over until the sun went down. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not a decision you make one day and then you're done. It's something you choose again and again, little by little, until one day you realize the weight you were carrying isn't as heavy anymore. Did I fully forgive Clarissa? I don't know. Maybe I never will completely. But I was trying. Because Eleanor would have wanted that. And because holding on to anger was only hurting me. 1 year after Eleanor's death, I did something I'd been putting off. I went to the cemetery. Her grave was in a quiet corner under an oak tree, exactly where she'd asked to be buried. The headstone was simple. Eleanor Margaret Whitmore. Beloved wife and mother. She loved with her whole heart. I sat down on the grass next to her and just talked. Told her about the garden, about the kids at the foundation, about Clarissa's phone call and the music box. Told her I missed her every single day but that I was okay. That I was surviving. That I was even finding moments of happiness again. You were right, I said out loud, not caring if anyone heard. About everything. About love, about patience, about letting go. I'm trying to live the way you taught me. I hope that's enough. The wind rustled through the leaves. A bird sang somewhere nearby, and for just a second, I could have sworn I felt Eleanor sitting next to me, holding my hand the way she used to. I stayed there for an hour, then stood up, brushed off my pants, and walked back to my car. Life was waiting. And even though Eleanor wasn't physically in it anymore, she was still there in every choice I made, every kindness I showed, every moment I chose peace over anger. As I drove home, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I got a job. Real one. Non-profit helping kids. Thought you'd want to know. Still working on myself. See. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back. Good. Keep going. She'd be proud. I didn't know if Clarissa and I would ever have a real relationship. Maybe we wouldn't. Maybe some bridges were burned too badly to rebuild. But maybe, just maybe, we could both be better people because of the woman who'd loved us despite our worst selves. And honestly, that was enough. If you believe people can change, even after they've hurt you, let us know in the comments. Because second chances aren't about forgetting the past, they're about choosing hope for the future. I'm 72 now. 2 years have passed since Eleanor died, and life looks different than I ever imagined it would. The house is still too quiet sometimes, but I've learned to fill it with other things. Music Eleanor loved. Voices from the television. The sound of my own footsteps in the morning. I've made peace with solitude in a way I never thought possible. I still volunteer at the Children's Hope Foundation twice a week. There's a kid there now, Marcus, 12 years old, who reminds me of myself at that age. Curious about how things work, always asking questions. I've been teaching him basic mechanical principles, and last month he built his first small engine. The look on his face when it actually started? That's the kind of moment that makes everything else worth it. Clarissa and I talk maybe once every few months. Brief conversations, usually through text. She's still in California, still working at that nonprofit. She sent me a photo last Christmas of her volunteering at a toy drive. She looked different. Not just older, but softer somehow. Like someone who'd finally stopped running from herself. I don't know if we'll ever be close. Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is just that we're both trying to honor Eleanor's memory by becoming people she'd be proud of. I've started writing down my memories of Eleanor. All the little things I don't want to forget. The way she'd steal bites of my breakfast when she thought I wasn't looking. How she'd fall asleep reading in bed with her glasses crooked on her face. The sound of her laugh when I told a particularly bad joke. These details matter. They're what made her real, what made our love real. Last week, I was going through more of her things. I'm still finding hidden treasures years later, and I discovered one final letter. It was tucked inside her favorite book, Pride and Prejudice, in an envelope addressed to me. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Gerald, it began. If you're reading this, you've survived the worst. You've buried me, faced Clarissa, and somehow found your way through the grief. I'm so proud of you. I had to stop reading for a minute, wipe my eyes, take a breath. I want you to know that the years I spent with you were the happiest of my life. You gave me something I'd never had before. Someone who loved me without conditions, without expectations, without wanting to change who I was. You saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. That's the rarest gift a person can give. I don't know what Clarissa did after I passed. I hope she found her way back to kindness. But even if she didn't, I don't want you to carry that burden. You've done enough. You've loved enough. You've given enough. Now it's time for you to live for yourself. Find joy again, Gerald. Take that trip we always talked about. Learn something new. Make friends. Maybe even love again if your heart opens to it. Don't turn our house into a museum of memories. Keep it alive. That's what I want for you. And if you're wondering whether you did right by me, whether you were a good husband, let me answer that question clearly. You were everything. You were more than I deserved and exactly what I needed. Thank you for 35 years of being my person. I'll be watching from wherever I end up, cheering you on, hoping you find peace and happiness and all the things you gave me so freely. I love you, Gerald. Forever and always. Your Eleanor. I sat in that house we'd built together, holding her final words, and felt something shift inside me. Not the absence of grief, that never fully goes away, but the presence of something else. Permission. Permission to keep living, to keep growing, to keep finding reasons to smile. So I've decided to take that trip. Eleanor and I always talked about seeing the Grand Canyon, but never got around to it. I'm going next month. Not because I need to run from memories, but because I want to make new ones. I'm also thinking about getting a dog. Eleanor always wanted one, but her allergies made it impossible. Maybe a rescue, something that needs a second chance as much as I do. And I've started having dinner once a month with some of the other folks from the grief support group. We've become friends, this strange little family of people who understand loss in ways others can't. Life isn't perfect. There are still hard days when I wake up reaching for Eleanor and remember she's not there. Still moments when something funny happens and I turn to tell her before reality crashes back. Still nights when the silence feels too heavy to bear. But there are good days too. Days when I laugh without guilt. Days when I feel grateful for what I had instead of bitter about what I lost. Days when I understand what Eleanor meant in that letter, that love doesn't end with death. It transforms into something else. Something that lives in how we treat people, how we face hardship, how we choose to move forward. If there's anything I've learned from all of this, it's that greed really does destroy people. Not always in obvious ways, but in quiet ones. Clarissa lost years with her mother chasing money that was never going to fill the emptiness inside her. She lost relationships, respect, peace of mind. And for what? For a fortune she never got and wouldn't have made her happy anyway. But I've also learned that it's never too late to choose differently. Clarissa is trying now, even after everything. That matters. It doesn't erase the past, but it creates a different future. Eleanor taught me that love is a choice you make every single day. Not just romantic love, but the choice to be kind when anger would be easier. The choice to forgive when bitterness seems justified. The choice to hope when cynicism feels safer. I made those choices for 35 years because of her. And now I'm making them because of who she taught me to be. Sometimes late at night, when the house is dark and quiet, I'll wind up that music box Clarissa sent me. I'll listen to the tune Eleanor used to hum, watch that little ballerina spin, and feel something close to peace. Because in the end, the loudest revenge really is silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of someone who's chosen to be at peace instead of at war. The silence of knowing you lived with integrity, loved with your whole heart, and became someone worth being proud of. Eleanor gave me that gift. And I'm going to honor it for the rest of my life. To anyone out there who's grieving, who's been betrayed, who's facing battles they never asked for, keep going. Be good even when no one thanks you. Stay honest even when no one believes you. Choose kindness even when cruelty seems deserved. Because life always brings justice to those who wait long enough. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's becoming someone you're proud to be, regardless of what anyone else thinks. That's Eleanor's legacy. That's what she left me that mattered more than any house or any fortune. She left me the courage to keep choosing love. If this story touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss more stories like this. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.